let's start from here. From the days of British colonialism to present-day democracy, Nigeria's political story has been shaped, strained, and sometimes shattered by ethnicity. What was once a tool for colonial control, divide and rule has become a persistent problem in nation building. From the Igbo secessionist struggle and the Biafran War to Niger Delta militancy, the June 12 Yoruba protests and now Middle Belt cries for autonomy, every major region in Nigeria has at some point cried out against marginalization. Recently, conversations resurfaced about the renaming of streets in Lagos, sparking debate around identity politics and ethnic dominance. Beyond our borders, we have seen anti-Nigerian protests in Ghana, reminding us how ethnicity and migration intersect across West Africa. So today, we ask the questions. Why are we still divided by tribe? How do ethnic grievances influence policy, development, and even democracy in Nigeria and beyond? We are looking at the topic, divided by tribe, ethnic politics in Nigeria and beyond. I have with me this morning Aminu Mosibodi, a public affairs analyst and researcher who will help us make sense of the root causes and the way out. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you this morning. And just like I said, we are looking at that topic, and I want us to start, from the basis really, so we can understand the root causes of this problem. Because I learned that, during the colonial era, the British, they had to introduce the concept of divide and rule, and then there was a merging of the Northern Protectorate with the Southern Protectorate, and then these people did not take into cognizance the fact that these people have, differences in culture, in tradition, and all of those things, though they did it for their own, economic gain. And then it appears that ever since then, the foundation, that shaky foundation, has continued to haunt us in the country. Can you take us through, the basis of this problem?
Well, thank you for, at least allowing us go through the historical trajectory of tribalism or ethnicity in Nigeria. Let me make this clear as a way of starting.
Okay.
Now, there is nothing wrong with being tribal. However, what would be wrong is tribalism. Okay. There is nothing wrong in asserting your tribalness or your ethnicness. What would be wrong is, tribal bigotry. Now, before colonialism, because again, we also have to go back in time, like they say that, the hunchback, what you're carrying is a bit slant. And he said, hey, you're looking at the top, you're not looking at, the base. Yeah. Now, the fact is, before colonialism, we know that we had our different tribal groups. Yeah. And there were what we call intertribal relations. We know, for instance, that among Yoruba, the use of horses, for instance, was prominent. Yet, it is a known fact that horses cannot thrive within this region because of the terrain and, of course, the geographical terrain. And so, these horses come from the north. And we know we have that exchange. And so you see that even in our lingua, a lot of words that you use, come from one tribe and one tribe or the other. And that's why, culture is like a melting point where you have pick from here, pick from there. And, everyone respected their, each other. Now, when colonialism came, at that time, the whole idea of, tribalism was not known. But like Lord Ake would say, in his inaugural lecture, he talks about social structure. And he said that one of the, introduced social structure that colonialism introduced was tribalism, because that was essential for it to embellish itself and keep the people divided, as you said, using the principle of divide and rule.
Yeah.
And after colonialism, now there was also a transmutation from colonialism to a new era, which is the post-colonial era. And, tribalism became a veritable tool. In fact, because within the framework, let's look at Nigeria, for instance. Okay. All the major parties we had largely, transmuted from tribal groups. Or, tribal, you talk about the action group, AG, which came from, Egbemo Dudua. Yeah. You talk about
NCNC.
The NPC, okay, which came from the Arewa, group and all that. And then NCNC was a bit freer because it was formed in Lagos, by...
But it was Igbo dominated.
Yes, by Abad Macaulay, Joseph Egati Shingo, and then you had, Nnamdi Azikiwe coming at the later point. So these tribal politics had been there. This tribal now with tribal politics, it also became a tool to blow up the old tribal differences. Now we must be clear about this. With tribalism came the idea of tribal bigotry, the idea of what I'll call tribal Zionism, where you feel that, oh, my own tribe is superior to yours, and everything now began, and politicians being who they are, blew it very well. We saw how, for instance, the whole attempt by Nnamdi Azikiwe to get a hold of Western region, was thwarted in 1959 because, in 1954, because Awolowo was able to, preach to members of the Badu People's Party (IPP), which was then led by the likes of the old Penkelemes, Adelabu, or not the one that we know now, and how he was able to form an alliance with them to win the structure of Western region. And now the NCNC was printed as a party for the North, a party from the East trying to have a conquest of the West. And we also saw how, even in the campaign, in the build-up of the 1964 elections, how, despite the differences between Ladoke Akintola and Awolowo, the use of, if you listen to some of the audio clips from, of the campaign from, Akintola, for instance, where he was saying that some people were being used by the North, and then you see those of the Awolowo faction also saying, accusing Ladoke Akintola of being, a stooge of the North in the West. And you also saw what happened when the action group went to the North in the build-up to campaign after I now removed the motion for self-independence in 1956, and how they were stoned in the North, particularly in Kano, and how it became, and how when they came to Lagos for the parliament sitting, they were also booed in return. So this political dimension, this and tribal dimension to the politics had been with us. Now, how did we get to the point where it became so embellished? I think we should not delude ourselves that we are one. That is a great mistake on our part as a country.
Okay, can we blame the colonizers, 100% for this?
I think it's a case of passing the buck and, not wanting to take responsibility. There is nothing wrong with, we are not the only ones that were colonized. Let's be frank with that. Okay. There are other countries. In fact, there's this work by Nnamdi Azikiwe that he published in 1959 or 61, I'm not so sure about it, where he said that, our differences could be a sense or a source of strength for us rather than a source of differences. And if you look at it really, Canada has a lot of tribal groups. Let's not even go far to Canada. Let's come to in Africa here. You see what is happening between the Hutus and the Tutsis. And as much as we may say that there is still this on the ground, the on the ground hatred for each other, but you see them at least working as one in Rwanda. So okay. The issue is we do not want to, we are trying to force a unity that we should not. The first step towards a cordial interpersonal relationship is understanding that each person is unique. And that is where the place of respect comes in. Unfortunately, what we have been preaching over the time has been tolerance. And this has been my, my thesis, that tolerance has an elasticity point. If you tolerate me, there is a point to which you will not be able to tolerate me again. However, if you respect me, and by respect I mean you understand that I'm a human person. I have my own uniqueness. I have my uniqueness different from you. Yorubas have this saying that that be a mikuro ninda. So when you want people to be like you, you become a wicked person. Okay. So when you understand that everyone will not be like you. So when you understand that the fact that your children prostrate to greet you does not mean everyone will prostrate or kneel to greet you.
But sometimes, sorry to cut you, sometimes respect does not work. And then tolerance will have to come to play. Let's take a look at what has been going on in Benue, in Plateau. These people have no regard for human lives.
That's the place of respect. It is not tolerance. It is respect.
Okay. It is still respect.
Yes, it is respect. Understanding that you are an elder, I'm a farmer. And so the elder understands that I don't play with my crops. The farmer also understands that the elder does not play with his cattle.
Okay.
And so that place of understanding, oh, this is his uniqueness. All right, but if you look around, even within, you know, what I'll call tribal groups, you see that embellished hatred. Okay, so for instance, among Igbos, you see an Onitsha man, you know, refer to other parts of Igbo land as only Igbo. You see someone from Olu, for instance, from Imo, refer to an Ebonyi man or does not see an Ebonyi man as truly Igbo. So you see an Eza man in Ebonyi State, see an Ezilo man as, you know, just anyhow. Or you see an Effium man in Ebonyi State, still the same Ebonyi, see an Eza man as being belligerent. Then you come here, you know, in the Southwest, you hear proverbs like Akini Jakini, Afini, Onjafini. So you say, oh, if you want to greet me, greet me. Okay. What's the meaning of, oh, the son of Shodeke, that's an Egba man in front of the house of an Ibadan man, knowing full well the hatred that tells you of the embellished, you know, the embellished aversion we have for each other. But when you come to understand that each one is unique in his own right, we will not have all those problems. Unfortunately, politics has also become a veritable weapon. I was saying something before, you know, I diverted a bit. Now, when colonialism left, our elites took the position of the colonialists. And I think it was...
Do you think they took the position of the colonialists, or they were trying to, you know, call for a system whereby we can come out of the colonialism? I mean, talk about, you know, independence, because the likes of about Macaulay, Nnamdi Azikiwe, I mean, all of these people, I think that it was more of clamoring for independence than trying to take the position of the
they were clamoring for independence using tribalism. Now that's where the problem. So it was a quest to ensure that this independence falls largely in my hands, and so rallying my people towards that end. Okay. So you saw the politics that went into the formation of government in 1959. And until we get to that point where the elites themselves purge, because when they took this space, okay, they also inherited the values of the colonialists. And what's the values of the colonialists? You must divide them. And so you see that, okay, good. On Saturday, the Falcons played Morocco. And you did not hear anybody say, Jamilusi is Yoruba.
Football has a way of uniting us.
Oh, no. That's to tell you that. Okay. So these fault lines, I call them fault lines. Okay. Now, these fault lines are pseudo fault lines, because even if you look at it, or you know, the basis of our unity are actually faulty. When you say, oh, you are Ijebu, you are Egba, you are Ibadan, you are Ogbomoso, you are from Ilorin, you know, you are from Iwo and all that. Do we even see each other as one? In the heat of the crisis between Ladoke Akintola and, you know, Awolowo, the argument was rife. So among the different tribal groups, you know, funnily enough, people would say, oh, the north, and then you look at it and ask yourself, do people understand the embellished, you know, that sense of aversion that even tribal groups in the north have for each other or have for one another? So does the Fulani man see the Hausa man as amounting to anything?
That's another point of discussion.
So does the Hausa man see the Fulani man as having, as amounting to anything? So this embellished hatred. And how did we get here? Politicians have seen it as a veritable tool. If I want to get votes from you, one of the easiest rallying points has been religion and ethnicity. Why? Because anything that leads to contested space, okay, people will get riled up, and they will look beyond the demon in the one who is preaching. So if you look at the characters who have been preaching, you know, these things, they will not even see whether, oh, this person is using us to cash out. No. What
in as much as you belong to my
tribe. What they see is that, oh, this man is protecting our space, hence he must be supported. So these are the issues. So politicians have seen it as a very strong tool, and that's why you see that it plays out more often during election, when the elections are coming in. And terribly, we have now gotten to a point where hosts and settlers, there is no respect. So you come into my space and feel that you can desecrate my space, all in the name of I have been tolerant, or I've accommodated you, and then you feel that you can contest my space.
Speaking of space, because of time, because we have a lot to talk about, let me quickly link it to what is going on in Ghana. When people say history repeats itself, I argue that, to a reasonable extent, because I believe if you don't learn from history, you are doomed to repeat history. That's correct. So I want to ask you, looking at what is going on in Ghana, let me quickly link it to what happened in the past. We had a system in 1983 when the then president, Shehu Shagari, sent Ghanaians, not just Ghanaians, the Benin people, Togolese, out of the country. Why? Because these people came into Nigeria because of the oil boom, from the 60s to the 70s. And then we were in a crisis in the 80s, early 80s. So the president asked these people to leave. And then before that, in 1969, the then, Ghanaian Prime Minister also asked Nigerians to leave. So people have said that it was because it was a retaliation of what Ghana did to Nigerians that made them say, okay, you people come and be going to. So when we don't learn from the past, we tend to repeat it. Now let me link it to 2025. Ghanaians are saying Nigerians must leave Ghana. Why? Because of insecurity. They have said that there is prostitution has also increased, and apart from that, an Igbo king is also saying, I want to own lands. Can you help me unpack all of this?
Well, the truth is this. Again, politicians are the same everywhere.
Okay.
And that's why it is often said that politicians campaign in prose but rule in poetry. If you look at what is happening in Ghana, not just Ghana, let's move away. If you look at the trend of populism across the world, you see the Donald Trump of this world. You see what is happening in Canada. You see what is happening in the UK with Brexit and the pariah personality like Kemi Badenosi that calls herself Kemi Bidnock and the like. You see one thing: when politicians have failed, there is always a tendency to blame the other man. So rather than accept their fault and their guilt, it is easier to blame the other man. In American politics, it's called passing the buck. So the American system has failed. The American politician has failed. So what then do you cannot blame the American elites, for failing the American masses. So you should blame the migrants for being the ones taking your jobs. So when the United Kingdom government, both the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, have failed the people, to save them, then they blame migrants, and then they feel that, oh, let's choke these migrants, and then the people say, oh yes, so it's about take it back, MAGA, make America great again, all right, and this is the trend. So you come to South Africa, you see xenophobic attacks. ANC has failed. And rather than own up that ANC has failed, it is better to blame migrants from other countries like Nigeria.
Okay.
Because they will be seen as, oh, so these are the people taking our jobs. Now, if jobs were provided for you, how can foreigners take your jobs? If your government were to be serious, all they needed to do was engage in indigenization policies or nationalization policies. Indigenize some of the establishments so that the jobs will be available. But because they know they did not provide the jobs, they need to find something to blame. And that's the same thing that played out in Ghana. Okay, the Ghanaian system is definitely failing the system, and it cuts across boards. Okay, when Shagari embarked on his Ghana must go, and then sending out Beninois and Togolese, where Beninois, Togolese, and Ghanaians, the reason for the failure of the system, knowing full well that we had the embellished corruption that we saw under Gowon. We saw the unabated corruption under Muritala Mohammed, and of course, unfortunately, Muritala Mohammed is now a saint.
I think some argue that about 1 million of them were living in Nigeria at that time, and it was affecting employment system.
Definitely it will. There is no way, there is no system this has been done. We saw when the UK was saying, oh, we will not allow people bring in dependents, and then these same dependents are the ones funding your system. with their monies. So it's a case of shooting yourself in the leg, you know, by, you know, cutting your nose just to spite your face. So this is what would always happen. Politicians know that they failed, and rather than own up that we have failed, they would, you know, look for what I'll call a soft spot.
Okay.
And it is always easier to blame the other man. It is always easier to blame the other man. So you see these old sentiments arise when politicians preach the narrative. See, this is it. The people are the caterpillar of Commonwealth. And that is why we often say that, you know, the political parties and politicians are like gatekeepers.
Okay.
Political parties are gatekeepers. They determine and they gatekeep the bad people from getting into power. Now, when political parties fail in this regard and the wrong people get into power, they begin to turn the system to their own interest. They turn and twist the system to their own interest. And people who are already aggrieved take some of these things that these politicians are preaching, and it becomes, oh, a weapon. So they weaponize, you know, the situation. They may weaponize poverty, they may weaponize, you know, bigotry, they may weaponize tribalism and all that to their own, for their own interests. And that's what you see, you know, play out, and has been playing out not just only in Nigeria, but across the world. So
looking at what Ghana has done now, and looking at the trend that I explained, don't you think Nigeria will still find a way to say that, okay, for that you have done, we are going to retaliate again?
You know, there's also what we call the principle of reciprocity in international politics. If you are sending our people out, of course, reciprocity would demand that we also send, you know, yours away as well. But then the truth is, there are other ways, you know, engaging in dialogue in the international space than, you know, even reciprocity. Because you know that if these people are moving, they will be moving with their investments in the country. And I remembered when the xenophobic attacks in South Africa came up, I think sometime 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and Nigerians said they were going to attack, you know, they were going to attack, what's it called? They were attacking investments by South Africans. And what came to mind is, if you attack those investments, your people, your brothers, your sisters are the ones working there. And so you can be sure that you're going to throw them out of jobs. So that's the effect. Now, I think more often than not, we should dwell on how did we get to this point? What exactly is the problem? Why have we decided to be hostile to one another? Like I said, you see, beyond the whole what I'll call phony identity, I call it phony identity. So you are Egba, Ibadan, and then we say we are Yoruba. So we speak against someone who is Igbo, maybe from Anambra, and then someone from Ebonyi also joins that person. Now I bet you that if you are able to win that war, we will still fight, because that's when I will remember that you are Egba,
okay,
and I'm Ibadan, or you are from Ogbomoso, and I'm Ijebu, or you are Ijebu, I am Remo. Now that's still within the same space, you know. You call them all Ijebus. Then that's when you hear that, oh, no, you are Ijebu, I am from Remo, we are not the same. Go across our country, you know, across the country. In the history of Ogun State, Yewa people have never produced the governor of the state. In the history of Oyo State, Ogun people have never produced the governor of the state. Oyo people have never produced the governor of the state. Ibarakpa people have never produced the governor of the state. Ogbomoso has done it only once in the history of a state that is over 50 years.
Even Nigeria as a country, Igbos are complaining that they've not been able to, you know, become a president of the country.
And so if you go across in Ebonyi State, Ezza people have never produced the governor of the state. And you see Ezza people all around. So these are issues. In Kogi State, Okun people have never produced the governor of the state. Osanya people have never produced the governor of the state. The Nupes there have never produced the governor of the state.
But the federal government, they talk about federal structure a lot. They talk about zoning, and then even looking at the fact that this was what led
federal character.
Exactly, federal character. This was what led to a crisis in 1995 when the likes of Ken Saro-Wiwa and 8 other Ogoni men, were killed. And even since then, 1995, 2025, these issues, we still have them, still hot. What do you think is going on? Because the federal government will say, okay, we are looking at federal character to appoint this person, appoint that person. Do you think that they are doing it the right way?
Now, let me shock you. Do you know that typically, the ordinary man or woman on the streets does not care what tribe you are from?
Okay.
This is how you know. Go to the market. The market woman will not ask you whether you are Yoruba, Igbo, or Hausa before she sells to you. So money knows no tribe. When we die, okay, the earth will not ask whether you are Igbo, Nupe, Igala, TV, Ibira, Osae before it takes you up. Now, it tells you that's why I call them false identities. So, these issues come up because we have failed in one regard, and that is to bring about development. Now, if there is, I'll give you an example. When you see politicians, in spite of his several flaws, when Murtala Mohammed died in 1976, the whole country was enveloped in gloom. It does not matter whether he was a Fulani man. It did not matter that he was a Fulani man. What mattered was that, people saw him as, a man that was coming with a new thing. When June 12 was annulled, it did not matter that MK Abiola is an Egba man.
You were so interested in putting out the
So, the ordinary man or woman on the street is concerned about development. However, when they don't get that development, there's this theory called the frustration aggression theory. Now, when people are frustrated, it becomes a tool to make them aggress. And so, what we have seen is that because politicians have failed in their duty to ensure development, it is easier for them to mobilize aggrieved people, frustrated persons, towards tribal ends or towards tribal goals. Because at the moment I feel that, I'm not getting anything, so they will tell me, the problem is the man at the center. When Buhari was there for 8 years, you could imagine the number of jibes and jabs that the Fulanis were receiving right, left, and center. Now, Buhari is no longer there. You have a man who is from the southwest. Right?
Yes.
How has he bettered the lots of Yakabira? How has he bettered the lots of Femi Foga?
However, sorry to quote you, Rabi Kwakwanso, said recently that I think he directed, his comments to the president, that he feels the North has been marginalized too much in terms of, construction of roads.
Where was Rabi Kwakwanso when Buhari was there for 8 years?
So this is still tribalism.
Exactly. So how has Buhari bettered the lots of even the people in Daura? How has Tinubu been president better the lots of Iragbiji people in Osun State, which is his ancestral home, or even the people of Lagos where he was governor for 8 years? So is the bag of rice, the amount of the cost of the bag of rice different in Lagos or even in the whole of Southwest from what you buy in the Southeast? Is the standard of living better in Lagos or in the whole of the Southwest than what you have in the Southeast? But then the politicians will not make you see that. They would only make you see those tribal fault lines, which is a rallying point. 2023 election was an election built and anchored on religion and tribalism largely. So you see the Awalokan, Yoruba Ronu, you see a Peter Obi, of course, fanning the embers of his own tribal interests. You see Atiku fanning the embers of his tribal interests. Because they will not tell you. Now, the ordinary Igbo man, these Imbati people are terrible people. They are the reason for the failure of Nigeria. But he did not go to Anambra State to tell Soludo why he's not developing his state well. He did not go to Ebonyi State to tell him Ifuru why the state is still embellished in poverty and becoming the poverty capital of Nigeria, of the Southeast. He did not go to Imo State to tell the governor why Imo State is in the state it is. He did not go to Abia State. He would overlook the faults in his own state, but is beaming satellite on Lagos. So the man in the north feels that Tinubu is his problem, but he will not talk about his governors who are doing nothing about the dangerous level of out of children population in the state, the dangerous level of Almajirism in the state, the dangerous level of poverty in the state. No, he will not.
Okay. Speaking of the Igbos, you mentioned something, so allow me to link it to this current story that we have on board. There are activities that led to the 1967 to 1970 Civil War, and a lot of scholars have argued that the first coup in Nigeria, 1966, was propagated mainly by the Igbos. A lot of northerners and southerners were killed, and so there was a counter coup where a lot of Igbos were also murdered, and that led to the Civil War where Ojukwu declared Biafra. That led to the secession. And ever since then, we have still been having Igbos come out to say that we have been marginalized, this and that. Let me link you to the renaming of street in Lagos. A lot of persons have also said that, is tribalism, trying to replace, some streets that had Igbo names, with some Yoruba names. What do you make of that?
Now, let me start from the rear about the renaming of streets.
Okay.
It is essentially the prerogative of the state to determine which and who gets a name.
Okay. As
regards the streets.
Okay.
But that's the duty of the state and the local government, largely. And so, I was born and bred in Lagos. I was born and bred in Mushin, and of course I traversed the length and breadth of Lagos. And Bariga is like second home, to some of us. And what was called, what used to be called Charlie Boy Boston was never Charlie Boy Boston.
Okay.
At least those of us that grew up in Lagos if you grew up in Lagos in the 70s or the 80s, you know that used to be Second Pedro.
Boy, a lot of persons.
So you still have, up to date, you have First Pedro. That bus stop used to be Second Pedro. It was, now, and I use this analogy. My maternal grandmother has a house in Ikodo, in Ikeja, which was close to Pepper Street, where Kalakuta Republic was. And some of us were, regular visitors to Kalakuta back in the day. Now, then, when Kalakuta was still in Pepu, nobody remembered it was Pepu. So if you are going there, you say, I'm going to Kalakuta. Even the street adjoining the adjacent streets, Olayeni, nobody remembered the name. So all the streets there. Now, imagine if Fela had lived for 70 to 80 years, and Kalakuta had still been there. The name Pepu or Olayeni would have fizzled out. And that name never got the approval of the states. All right? Now, that said, the state has a prerogative. Let's also not overlook the fact, because when I hear people say, oh, it's tribalism, have we asked ourselves, was that the only street that was renamed? There were streets named after Yoruba that were renamed as well. So is that tribalism too?
Don't you think that was a way to not make it look like it?
At least we know that we have something which is a precedent. Okay,
you mentioned that it was not Charlie Boy is in the street before.
Yes, it was never Charlie Boy Boston.
Okay, but there were claims that he got that street was later renamed after him because of his character, how he was able to benefit.
I just gave you the example of Kalakuta in now. People would always define a place by landmarks.
Okay.
Okay. If I tell you, back in the day, if we tell you that we are going to Pepu, you will not remember Pepu. But if I tell you, okay, meet me at Kalakuta, Kalakuta is familiar. It's easier for you as a landmark to get wherever you are going to. And so, when Charlie Boy got there in the late 80s, and of course, with his activities and weirdness, which was unusual then, his own uniqueness, it became a rallying point. All right. Okay. Now, as much as you want to say, oh, as Charlie Boy contributed to that place, well, you cannot deny that fact that he has had his contribution, whether positive or negative, because there would always be two sides, to a story.
Yeah.
And so he has made his mark. And it now depends on, but if you have made your mark, and the same you now begin to contest the space with the aboriginal people of the place.
The indigents.
Yes, and then you are saying that, oh, Lagos is a no man's land. Then you do not have a place there.
So
yes.
we need to correct some things about our mentality as well. So,
so you cannot disrespect your host and expect that they should honor you. It is not done anywhere.
Do you think that is what Nigerians are doing in Ghana?
Yeah, definitely. That's what we're doing. You see, you must, that's why I talked about the place of respect. There must be place of mutual respect. I don't get to a space. If I come into your house, okay, and then I begin to tell you, why did you place this picture like this? Why is your TV like this? Where did you, this is your TV. It doesn't make any sense. This TV should have been placed there. That is disrespect. Then now gets worse when I begin to contest that space with you and say, no, this is my space. We all own it together. Okay?
Okay.
When we were for that sang Gbogbo Wala Leko, I remember, back then when the worries and the realm of people were saying, no, we know those who own Lagos. Let's not deceive. So if Lagos has been hospitable to you, you should not go ahead to disrespect the Aborigines. Okay? And damn that, and perish that thought that, oh, Lagos was a colonial creation. Maybe the Lagos state, but not Lagos. Because even the name Lagos came from the Portuguese name Lagos da Curano, which is the port of slaves. So Lagos had pre-existed colonialism.
And it used to be the capital at the time.
Well, it was the capital at the time, but the prosperity of Lagos was not because it was capital.
Okay, it was because
was Lagos the only capital? Was Calabar never a capital? So when we get to that point where we begin to preach, some things like, oh, Lagos is a no man's, it is disrespectful, and you expect them to now say, oh, well done.
Okay, I don't support that, but they have also claimed that they add to the economy. Most of them are businessmen and women. What do you make of that?
And when you added to the economy, if the host had been hostile to you, would you have thrived? You say there is a place of, you must respect your host.
Okay.
If someone has accommodated me, the fact that, oh, I am contributing to the economy, so you think that if you don't contribute to the economy, others will not contribute?
It shouldn't be the ground.
Why is it that up to date, areas like Zabo, which you now call Sabo,
okay,
are still maintained nationally? Because those who are there will not come and contest your space with you. And see, we also have to be careful so that we don't fall into the pit, the pit of generalization.
Okay.
It is not all, those who are of southeastern origin that do this. I think it's just a couple of, some of them, particularly the young ones, who do not have an understanding of history. And that takes me back to the first point you raised about the old coup and all that.
Yeah.
I think we also have to be careful to avoid playing the victim. You know what I call the victim mentality. Unfortunately, I've seen that sometimes we love to play the victim. For some of us who have read a lot about the Civil War, we know that there was no sync between Biafran soldiers and Nigerian soldiers. Biafran soldiers terrorized minority groups. That was why Eken Saro-Wiwa had to escape. Ask the Benin people. Nigerian soldiers terrorized others. We saw the program in Oka, we saw that of Onitsha.
Could it have been avoided, that war that has led us to where we are now?
Exactly. So if you look at it now, 1966 coup, the January 1966 coup, which many have labeled an Igbo coup, are they justified to label it an Igbo coup? Yes, we have Yoruba there, so someone like Victor Banjo and all that. But then if you look at it, why is it the case that virtually all that were killed were from other tribal groups?
Yeah, most northerners and southerners.
You now begin to, you have given a justification in a way to it. And then we had Biafra, and at the end of it all, we still paint, the victim game that, oh, no, both sides were victims. Now, this is, however, where I have a problem. Okay. And I feel that Nigeria as a state has chosen not to do the needful. It's been over 50 years since Biafran, the Civil War ended. But there has not been proper integration.
We still have the relics of the war.
Yes, there's not been proper integration too. The Igbo does not feel that he's still a part of Nigeria up till date.
And that's why they're calling for the secession.
Yes, so, and Nigeria also does not feel that the Igbo is, there is that, how do I call it, that sense of animosity.
Okay.
And I'll give you an example. After the genocide in Rwanda, what happened was that the president, you know, when Kagame came on board, he called for what we call the Gukana principle, where every aggrieved stated their own point and said, oh, you did this to me, you killed my wife, you killed my brother. And compensations and retributions were done. And that was how, to a large extent, you see that in Rwanda, the whole Hutu-Tutsi, you know, divide is reduced.
Okay.
But have we done that? Has there been proper reconciliation?
Okay.
So we still carry the pang and pain of the war.
Honestly, unfortunately, we need to go, but I appreciate the fact that you've been able to proffer some solutions to the problem. You know, you talked about integration, reconciliation,
exactly,
respect, I mean, rather than tolerance.
Of course not
and
tolerance.
Of course, I mean, this is a conversation that should continue, and I appreciate, you know, your presence this morning. Exactly. You know, we've been speaking with Aminu Mosebud, a public affairs analyst and a researcher. An interesting conversation with you this morning. All right, it's time to go. Tribe was never meant to divide us. It was meant to define our roots, not determine our rights. But when policy bends to ethnicity instead of equity, we risk turning diversity into division. Nigeria must decide, do we want a nation built on shared values or shattered by identity politics? Because unity is not forged by slogans. It is forged by fairness, inclusion, and justice for every community. As we end this conversation, remember, no tribe is superior and no Nigerian is a stranger in their own land. Thank you for joining us on Big Story today, and I leave you in the hands of these few words to ponder on. History does not repeat itself, but when people fail to learn from history, they are doomed to repeat history. My name is Oluwayemi Adela. I'm saying good morning.